An outflow of cash. China is losing money to the tune of billions. For the first time in 2 years, more money left China than entered. That's as imports grow and exports fall. And Chinese shipping containers dawdle around empty Chinese ports. What's driving this trend? Is it all due to China's draconian zero-COVID policy, or are other factors at play? What do you think? Let us know below and subscribe if you haven't already. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Billions of dollars moved out of China within 3 months last year, from October to December. Those months marked the first time in more than 2 years that China saw a net outflow of money. That means exports dropped dramatically in that period of time. At the same time, the money China spent on purchases from other countries exceeded the money it got from selling to other countries. That gap totaled $11.2 billion. This, according to analysis from Japanese media outlet Nikkei. It looked at data released by Chinese authorities. The total money outflow comes from the activities of both individuals and businesses using Chinese bank accounts. So why the change from an inflow to an outflow? It comes down partially to China's COVID-19-driven lockdowns. For most of 2022's fourth quarter, China maintained its strict zero COVID-19 policy. At the same time, other Asian countries had started opening up by that time, boosting production and exports. Orders slowly shifted from China to Vietnam, Indonesia, and other countries. Even now, that trend is showing no signs of slowing down. According to data released by China's General Administration of Customs, China's exports plunged by about 10% year-on-year in December. It was the third month of decline in a row. Online container leasing platform Container Exchange published some related data last month. It said the amount of goods China exported to the U.S. and Europe last year dropped nearly 20%. Now, empty containers are lying unused in Chinese ports. A recent video clip highlights a major port in southern China's manufacturing hub, Shenzhen. The usually busy hub is now virtually unused. On top of Beijing's lockdown policy, the worsening relationship between China and the West has also contributed to the slowdown. Right now, Europe is selling more goods to the U.S. than China is. That's as more and more American companies are diversifying supply chains away from China. What's more, about 6,000 chip companies in China shut down in 2022. That's an almost 70% rise from the year before. Those closures partly due to industry pressure from U.S. sanctions. Is Beijing planning to provide lethal military aid to Russia for its war in Ukraine? The United States says it's ready to impose consequences on the Chinese regime if it chooses to help the Kremlin. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the story.
State Department spokesperson Ned Price says the administration has not yet seen the CCP provide Russia with lethal aid, but he doesn't believe the Chinese regime has taken that off the table. Price says the regime would be hit with sanctions if it attempted to further assist Russia's conquest.
Providing lethal weapons to Russia for use in Ukraine or systematic assistance with sanctions evasion would cause real consequence in our bilateral relationship.
Price added that the response would not be limited to the country as a whole.
We've been clear, we'll not hesitate to target Chinese companies or individuals that violate our sanctions.
The U.S. and its allies have long feared the CCP's economic and diplomatic support for Russia could evolve into providing weaponry. Those fears were reignited this month when Secretary of State Antony Blinken suggested the regime could be preparing to deliver such support. Price says the CCP's willingness to bolster Russia's economy and spread Kremlin propaganda internationally demonstrated a growing alliance between the two authoritarian powers, adding that China and Russia were increasingly striving to erode the rules-based international order. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
The Pentagon has released a one-of-a-kind selfie. It came from a pilot who was surveilling the Chinese spy balloon as it crossed the U.S. The photo was snapped on February 3rd when the balloon was close to Kansas. Here are the details.
The aircraft the picture was taken from is a U-2 Dragon Lady. It's one of the only U.S. aircraft that can fly at such a high altitude. Officials say the images showed what the balloon was capable of, and that included conducting signals intelligence collection. The balloon was equipped with antennas and other gear for uploading sensitive information, along with solar panels to power its system.
More limits getting slapped on TikTok. The European Commission is banning staff from using the video sharing app on their work-issued phones. And for those using their personal phones for work, those devices must also stay TikTok-free. The move would affect over 30,000 employees. The Commission is the European Union's top executive body. It makes laws and manages day-to-day operations of the EU.
The measure aims to protect the Commission against cybersecurity threats and actions which may be exploited for cyber attacks against the corporate environment of the Commission.
Across the pond, the federal government, as well as most U.S. states, have already banned TikTok from government-managed devices. That's over concerns that user data could end up in Beijing's hands. TikTok is owned by Beijing-based developer ByteDance. Under Chinese law, companies must hand over data if officials ask for it. TikTok denies handing over user data to Beijing and said it is disappointed with the EU Commission's decision. Europe's top human rights watchdog deeming a years-long Russian ban illegal. In its January 31st ruling, the European Court of Human Rights took aim at Moscow's ban on certain informational materials. They are related to spiritual practice Falun Gong. The Kremlin issued the rule back in 2008 at the time of the Beijing Summer Olympics. The ban covers 4 materials, including the discipline's main book, Falun. Russia also outlawed 2 pamphlets that introduced the practice and highlighted Beijing's human rights abuses, plus an investigative report on the Chinese regime's forced organ harvesting. Organ harvesting is known as part of Beijing's persecution campaign against Falun Gong. Launched in 1999, it aims to eradicate the practice. Moscow labeled the 4 materials as extremist in its ban. But the European Court says the restriction violates freedom of expression. Levi Browdy, executive director of the Falun Dafa Information Center, welcomed the court's decision. He told the Epoch Times newspaper, quote, "We recognize Moscow is not the CCP," adding that Russian authorities can write their course and not do the CCP's bidding in suppressing religious freedom. Canadian human rights lawyer David Matas also commented on the ruling. He co-authored the report that Russia banned. In an email to the Epoch Times, he likened Moscow's rule to Beijing's, saying birds of a feather stick together, adding that citizens in both nations are entitled to freedom of speech in name only. Matas said he doubts Russia will abide by the European rulings, but called it a voice of sanity. Russia withdrew from the Council of Europe in March last year. The council includes the European Court of Human Rights. Moscow has refused to comply with any of the court's judgments since then. Falun Gong follows the core principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and features 5 meditative exercises. Beijing's nationwide suppression of the system continues in China today. Falun Gong adherents in Russia also face pressure for their beliefs. Caught red-handed, ex-employees of a South Korean electronics company found to have stolen semiconductor technology. From there, they allegedly handed the secrets to China. NTD's Sean Marshall has more.
Former employees of Semis, a Samsung subsidiary, have been convicted and jailed for technology theft, according to the Wall Street Journal. Semi's trade secrets were reportedly stolen and transferred to Chinese companies. Semis produces equipment used in the semiconductor and display manufacturing process. The information obtained by the ex-employees were equipment design blueprints and a list of related components extracted through photos and misappropriated files from 2018 to 2020. A South Korean court released its ruling on Monday, sentencing a former researcher at Semis to 4 years in prison for illegally obtaining the company's proprietary technologies related to its semiconductor cleaning equipment and using those technologies to build similar tools destined for export to China. 6 other ex-employees of Semis were also found guilty of technology theft and received sentences of up to 2.5 years in prison. Semis itself was fined around $768,000. Sean Marshall, NTD News.
At least 6 people are dead in China's Inner Mongolia region. A large-scale coal mine collapse caused a disaster, and nearly 50 people are still missing. Here's the latest.
The collapse happened at an open-pit mine operated by Xinjiang Coal Mining Company. Last year, the company was cited for multiple safety violations. The initial cave-in struck at around 1 p.m. Wednesday, burying people and mining trucks below in tons of rock and sand. State media reported that a mudslide disrupted rescue operations for several hours. Inner Mongolia is among the country's top coal producers. Like other regions in China, it's been producing at a heightened rate over the past year under a government call to boost local supply.
An urgent plea of investigation. 6 lawmakers are calling on the FBI to investigate a banker named Dominic Ng. The lawmakers are concerned that Ng could spill the beans on U.S. intelligence to Beijing officials. That's over his alleged ties to the Chinese Communist Party and the influential position he's holding right now. Let's zoom in.
President Biden tapped Ng to represent the U.S. at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC. In this role, Ng would have access to privileged information and intelligence. He would also advise world leaders on key issues. APEC is a forum that promotes free trade in Asia-Pacific region. Its 21 member countries account for over 60% of global GDP, including the U.S., China, and Australia. Ng's appointment comes 2 years after he donated to President Biden's fundraising committee called the Biden Victory Fund.
Before President Biden nominated him, Mr. Ng had donated $100,000 to the Biden Victory Fund and $35,500 to the Democratic National Committee.
Philip Lindzicki is an investigative reporter. He broke the story on Ng's ties to agencies linked to Beijing's United Front Work Department. The state agency works to expand the Chinese Communist Party's influence overseas. Experts say it's involved with Chinese espionage efforts.
And what this is the Chinese Communist Party's effort to manage those outside of the party. And so they are targeting non-Chinese, they're targeting religious minorities, and even traditionally they're going after business associations and trade unions and all types of clubs. They want to get control of these different organizations so that they can establish a united front and push the CCP's policy objectives.
And here's what Lindzicki uncovered about those ties. Ng has held high-level positions in groups tied to Beijing's United Front Work Department. Since 2019, he served as executive director of the China Overseas Friendship Association, or COFA. The United Front Work Department founded the group. Looking back to 2013, Ng worked as the executive director of another agency related to COFA. It's called the China Overseas Exchange Association. Ng met with 2 leaders from this organization in the U.S. and China. These 2 leaders are also members of what's called the CPPCC. That's the committee that oversees Beijing's United Front system. One of COYA's leaders is Qiu Yuanping. In a meeting, she told Ng that she has faith in Chinese-American elected officials and hopes they'll play more active roles in Congress, local government, and think tanks in the future. Ng wears multiple hats. On top of his CEO title for East-West Bank, he's also a member of a think tank in Washington called the Council on Foreign Relations. Beyond that, he's a former board member of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, Los Angeles branch. In the letter to the FBI, lawmakers highlighted a concern. They say China's United Front Department plus its affiliated groups allow people like Ng to gain influence in sensitive American institutions and advocate for Beijing's interests. They say Beijing used this tactic to infiltrate governments and influence policies and support outcomes deemed desirable by the Chinese Communist Party. NTD reached out to Ng for comment but did not receive a reply before airtime. Lindzicki said it's important for Americans to wrap their heads around a potential reality.
That there is a truly widespread and insidious network that is embedded itself in the United States, and that this network of individuals belong to businesses, they belong to local community organizations, they belong to media outlets, and they're in government. This is an extremely concerning potential reality for folks to have to grapple with.
Responding to the Republican lawmakers' letter, several Democrat lawmakers, including Judy Chu and Ted Lieu, defended Ng. In a statement, they said no Chinese American should face suspicions of disloyalty based on their ethnicity. The FBI said it has no further comment, and TD also reached out to the White House and AIPAC, but did not hear back before airtime.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for 2 years. Here's what to look out for in our second half. Is China gearing up to give lethal aid to Russia? And if it does, how would the U.S. respond? These questions and more are rising ahead of Chinese leader Xi Jinping's upcoming Russia visit. We sat down with John Moody, former executive vice president of Fox News and author of The World We Wish, for a breakdown. The full episode is available on our partner platform, Appointee. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow.